just for tonight. Lord, I just do pray that you would speak through me tonight. And Lord, thank you for fun. Thank you for laughter. Thank you for the ladies and guys that are here that are faithful and they came tonight to hear your word. Lord, I pray for any that are sick tonight, any that are not feeling well. Lord, that you would heal. And God, I just thank you again that we can come to your word with open hands and open hearts. Lord, I pray tonight that you would convict us, that we would take in every aspect of this message and use it for your kingdom purposes. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. There's two things in this message that I want to get across. Is one, there is a waiting and there's a warning in this text. There's a waiting and there's a warning. When I first started going out on dates later when I was in college, I didn't go on dates until I was in college, just by the way. So, a couple things that people told me was, they said, and this is something that I learned from godly people, is one, you want to make sure that you take everybody's warning. If the person's not really good friends with your friends, it's probably not going to work out. If they don't like your parents, it's probably not going to work out. So you have a lot of those things to look at. So you have to look out for the warning signs. The other thing that I was taught when I was starting dating was also the waiting. And a lot of us don't want to hear that because we don't like waiting for things, right? We like it just right off the fingertips, like right in your, right in front of you. Tonight, I want you to see the waiting, but I also want you to see the warning that's being presented here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of divide up the way that I do this tonight, in that James is speaking to Christians. He's talking to Christians about this warning, but also this waiting. But in the midst of it, he's also addressing these rich people, and the rich people that he's talking to are the ones that trust in their own wealth. And so what James is basically saying, he's saying, Christians, you got to be reminded that God will judge unbelievers for their empty trust and faith in wealth. But we got to be encouraged. So, yeah, God's judgment is coming, and that should cause us to take warning, but also should encourage us, because it should encourage us to be patient, that God's going to make all things right. So if all things are made right, you're going to be encouraged to continue, and that's what James is trying to get across. He wants you to see now tonight of a faith that is patient. So Chapin Baptist students, I want you to have a genuine faith that's active, that waits on the holy justice of God, is patient. So first thing you want to see in this passage is, you want to see the rich must be warned of the judge that's coming against them. What you wear and your wealth won't matter. That's what James says. He says, come now. Now remember last time he said, come now, he was speaking to the rich people again. If you look in chapter 4, verse 13, it says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will travel to such and such city and spend a year that there and do business and make a profit. So James was talking to people who were like, yep, business as usual. Yep, everything's going well in life. Yep, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Yep, I'm living the American dream. I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do. This is what I've been called to do. And James says, no, don't rely on your own time and your own business, because Jesus is coming back. You can't rely on those things. The only thing that you can rely on is the good that God wills. But now he's addressing rich people again who trust in their riches. He says, come now, you rich people. And I want you to look at this too as you're reading through this. Look at how many times it says you. So like, if I say, we did something wrong, you don't feel the weight of it that much, right? If I say, we did something wrong or we failed, I mean, yeah, you're going to be like, okay, I'm a total failure. But if I say, you failed, it gets personal, right? Now I'm putting it back in your ball court. So if I look at you and say, you failed or you did this, it gets personal. Well, that's what James is doing with the rich people. He's saying, you. He says it over and over again. He says to weep and wail, to mourn over the miseries that are coming to you. Your wealth is rotted and your clothes are moth-eaten. Now, I don't know if you've ever had moths eat your clothes, but I don't know if you know this, but moths, like the ones that like fly, and you can see them a lot of times near lights, they are the ones that actually don't eat your clothing. It's actually the larvae that they come from that eat your clothing. And so that's the reason why a lot of times when you get those clothes, they'll have little holes in them. Have you ever seen that where a moth, like the moth larvae, actually eat holes in clothing? Well, you have to put stuff in your closet in order for your clothes not to be moth-eaten, so they won't lose their luster. Well, James is saying your wealth and what you hold security in with your clothing will be moth-eaten. It will not last. He says your gold and silver has corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you. Or, as some translators say, it will be evidence against you, and it will eat your flesh like fire. You've stored up treasure in the last days. Now, how many of you ever watched the show Hoarders Alive? Raise your hand. You ever watched that before? If you ever watch it on YouTube, it will absolutely disgust you. Basically what they do is they go through different people's houses who hoard stuff. So I was watching one episode where this lady hoarded just tons and tons of junk in her house and roaches behind walls. I mean, it was disgusting. So they go through these houses because people just store stuff, and so then they can't even move in their own house. Like this lady was literally in her bed, bedridden, and she couldn't get hardly anywhere because she had so much stuff in her house. Now, we may think that's drastic, but a lot of times that's what our heart condition is. And Jesus tells us in Matthew 6, what we just read earlier, don't put your treasure here on earth because it's not going to last. He says, store your treasure in heaven. Store your treasure with eternal value. Because here's the reality of it, guys. All the stuff that you have, what you wear, the money you have, all that, you can't take it with you in your coffin. When you go in the ground, you can't take that with you in your coffin. Yeah, you might can take a sweatshirt or whatever that's going to be on you and go in the coffin, but you can't take that into eternity. Those things don't last. Gold and silver doesn't corrode. Y'all do realize that, right? It's supposed to be the stuff that doesn't corrode. It lasts. It's valuable. It was valuable during this time period. And James says, no. Even things that you hold value in that seem like it will always last forever, it's not going to last forever. And it will be a witness against you. It will be the evidence that you hold your riches on. It'll be the evidence that you are against God. So there's the warning. The rich must be warned of the judge that's coming against them. Secondly, the rich must be warned of the warrior coming against their injustice and worldly comforts. Look at verse 4. It says, look, the pay that you withheld from the workers who mowed your fields cries out, and the outcry of the harvesters has reached the ears of the Lord of armies. So basically we're given this picture of landowners who are basically doing injustices against their own workers. They're taking their harvesters and making them work long hours. If you read this will remind you a lot of what our study in Micah was. Remember in Micah we talked about that there was this prophet, Micah, who was talking about the landowners who cheated people out of their wealth, and they took money for themselves and they overworked their workers. And James is saying, no, you can't get away with that. You can't get away with your injustice. He uses this term in the last days. He's saying, you're living in a day where Jesus is coming back, and you need to be aware of his judgment. So much so that the outcry, and whenever you hear outcry in the Old Testament, it's always talking about an injustice that's being spoken on behalf of the one that is being put forth with being put forward with suffering and pain, suffering and pain on that person. And so he's saying, that suffering and pain is reaching the ears of the Lord of armies. It's reaching the Lord of hosts. The term Lord of armies is not a term that you should just look at and just think, oh, that's not that big of a deal. It gives us a picture of a divine warrior at war. And so this should really give you something to think about, that there is a divine warrior that is against the injustices of this world. So let's put it on your table right now, and let's get really practical. You see injustice all the time, maybe at school, maybe in your own life. But a lot of times what we forget is the biggest injustice we have is our own hearts. So we can look and point our fingers at everybody else and what they're doing wrong, but then what we got to do is take that finger and point it right back at ourselves. And the warning to us is, there's a judge that's coming to judge sin, and he's not going to let the guilty go unpunished. And he's saying that to these people that hold on to their wealth. The divine warrior that we talked about in Revelation 19, the one that's coming back, he's the same divine warrior that is looking at sin, and he's taking it seriously. But then listen to this. You have lived, so again, he's using that word you have lived luxuriously on the earth and have indulged yourselves. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned. You have murdered the righteous who does not resist you. So he's taking the rich and saying, you're doing injustices to the ones that are righteous, and they're not doing anything against you. And that's going to be important when we get to the next part of the section. But here's a couple things I want you to see. Number one, it says that you have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. Basically, it's giving this picture of a cow or an oxen that's eating grass in the field, not knowing they're going to be slaughtered, not knowing that they're going to just be prime rib in the next couple of days. That's the picture that we get. And what we do in this life is, a lot of times what we do is we think, I got all the time in the world, I've got all the things that I need, and all we do is fatten our hearts. Remember, James talked about what causes quarrels or fights among you. What did he say? Jealousy, selfish ambition, that are at war within you. The things that you pursue after, the sin that you pursue after, is at war in you. And the problem is, we don't really care about it when it's all said and done. Now, I'm not accusing everybody that you don't care. But in reality, before we came to know Christ, or if you don't know Christ, we live for our own ambition. And so we are like the ones that are having our fair share of wealth, of luxury, consuming things, not knowing that judgment is coming. And it says even this, you've been condemned and you murdered the righteous. Kyle, I've never murdered anybody. Yeah, you have. Jesus says if you hate someone even in your own heart, you commit murder. Kyle, I've never condemned anybody. Yeah, you have. I have too. We've all judged someone based off of what they look like. James already talked about that as favoritism. He talks about we break the royal law. We break the law of Christ when we judge one another. So here's what I want you to take away. I want to ask you one question from this one part of this passage. What is the very thing you hold on to so tightly that you can't give up? I want that to rest on you. What is the very thing you hold on so tightly that you cannot give up? Is it a hope or dream? Is it a future job? Is it a relationship? Is it bitterness? Is it a comfort? Is it your car? Is it your school? Is it your grades? What is it? What is it that you hold so tightly you won't let go? Are you the one in this passage that has to take the warning? For Christians, we need to read this and be reminded that we can be very easily tied to riches. We can be very easily tied to wealth. Why? Because we're consumed with it. It's all around us. So Christians, as you read this, even though this is speaking towards unbelievers who are rich, Christians, if you are in this room, you are so wealthy because of everything that God has blessed you with, and I am wealthy because of everything God has blessed me with. But we have to be warned, all right, we've been given this, what are we going to do with it? If you're not a Christian in this room, your connection with your wealth and riches will not last, and it will lead to your demise. That's the reason why he says in the part where it talks about that it will consume you like a fire. Your flesh will be consumed like fire. We have flesh that's very physical. We have fire that's speaking of hell, speaking of something eternal. So what we got to come to the realization is either your things in life that you hold on to will consume you now, or they're going to consume you later. And so what you have to decide is, am I going to let go of those things so that the fires of hell won't consume me, and so that I can trust in Jesus and be saved from that? Or am I going to hold on to that as I go on to the ways of hell? That's the picture that we're given in this passage. It's a very serious one. But here's the encouragement that I want to bring to you if you're a Christian, and this will also bring encouragement to those who don't know Christ, is that Christians are given a time where we have to be patient. Now, I know everyone's room's like, Kyle, don't tell me to be patient. And I'll tell you this, I hate when people tell me to be patient, right? Parents, have you ever heard your parents say you need to be patient? Yes, absolutely. Your coaches, have they ever said be patient? Yep, absolutely. Teachers, have you ever heard your teacher say, hey, be patient? Absolutely. Have you ever heard me say be patient? Yep, absolutely. It's difficult. It's difficult waiting. I know some of you are finding it difficult to wait for Tuesday. Tuesday can't get here fast enough, right? You're ready for Thanksgiving break to get here. Some of you are ready for some time off. You're ready for December to get here. Some of you are ready for summer vacation already, right? Some of you are ready to finish school. You want to graduate. You want to get away from your parents. You want to go to college. You can't wait to go to college. Some of you are ready to find that right person, the person that you'll date, the person that you'll marry, the person that you're thinking about. We're always waiting for something. We got to be patient. And that's exactly what we are to do. But we're to do what God has called us to do patiently until he returns. It was difficult for James' hearers to listen to this because they weren't patient at times because of suffering and pain. So Christians first need to be patient until Jesus returns. Look at verse 7. Therefore, because of everything that was just said, you're going to see brothers and sisters. Now he's speaking to Christians 4 times. Brothers and sisters, be patient until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and is patient until it receives the early and late rains? So during this time, a farmer had to wait for certain conditions in their environment for rain to come. There had to be a right timing. There had to be a certain type of patience. If you're a farmer, being a farmer is not easy. I have no clue what it's like to be a farmer, but I can only imagine the type of work, the hours, getting up early, making sure everything is just right in order, and also to rely basically on God's ability to bring rain. It's patient. That is the picture that we're given, That is the picture that we're given when it comes to being patient with the Lord. You also must be patient. Again, he's reiterating it again. You've got to be patient. Strengthen your hearts. Well, how do I strengthen my heart? Well, you strengthen it as you grow in holiness. It comes from 1 Thessalonians 3:13. We strengthen it as we see our hope. That comes from 1 Thessalonians 2:19-20. And this is where we stand our ground, is our hope in Jesus Christ. He's saying, stand firm in the midst of suffering. Stand firm in the midst, because there's redemption ahead. I want to read a passage to you from Joel chapter 2 really quick. And this is what it says in Joel 2:23. Children of Zion, rejoice and be glad in the Lord your God, because he gives you the autumn rain for your vindication. Again, it's talking about the injustices being brought forth where God is bringing justice. He sends showers for you, both autumn and spring rain as it is before. See, God is perfect in his timing with rain, and just as he is that, he's also promised to his people, look at me when I say this, he's promised to his people that he will bring restoration and redemption. Just as he did for the prophets of old, he's doing it for you now. He's promising you restoration and redemption in Jesus Christ, but you have to be patient. Be patient. Strengthen your hearts. Because, why? The Lord's coming is near. It's not far away. Yeah, it seems like very far away. It seems like we got all the time in the world. But you don't know when Jesus is coming back. Not only that, we got to be patient with one another. So we're patient until Jesus returns, but we're patient with each other until Jesus returns. Look at verse 9. It says, brothers and sisters, do not complain. All right, everybody just automatically sinned. You know, we automatically sin when it comes to this, right? Everybody's reading complaints about everything. You know how I know? Because I'm a student pastor. That's just how it works. You hear people complain about things. If you're in a church and you're like, I've never heard complaining before, you don't go to church very much. You're going to hear complaints out in the real world. You're going to hear complaints out in business. Well, a lot of people say, well, I just complain. That's just what I do. Well, this is what James says. It says, do not complain about one another so that you will not be judged. So what he's saying is, when we complain, it's actually evidence that our judgment is coming against us. So, the next time you complain about something, you got to think for yourself, when I complain, am I acting in faith that is patient? Because guess what? When things are going rough and you're really squeezed, like if I squeeze an apple, and I can't squeeze an apple really hard, but if I squeeze an apple, it's not going to be orange juice, right? It's not going to be orange juice. Y'all have heard that before, right? You squeeze something, whatever you squeeze, you're going to get whatever you squeeze out, right? That's the thing with it is with us. When we are squeezed and when we are pressured by the things of this world, the very things that come out is what we really are. So if you complain and you're not being patient, it really shows you where your faith is. And that's what James is saying. If you have a faith that's patient, you're going to look at that and you are not going to complain to one another. You are going to endure. It says, look, the judge stands at the door. God's not an Amazon truck driver who delivers what you want when you want it and gives you when you need it. But his timing requires you to be patient. Jesus is not a streaming service where you can cancel anytime and you can't cancel his judgment. His judgment is coming, and his judgment upon sin is coming. So the question for you is, are you going to pay it or is Jesus going to pay it? That's what I'm going to leave you with on that part. And then look what it says in verse 10. Christians must also endure until Jesus returns. Notice I said endure. And look at verse 10 through 11. It says, brothers and sisters, again, he's repeating this again to Christians. Take the prophets who spoke in the Lord's name as an example of suffering and patience. I want to read to you a passage from the Hebrews 11 really quick that touches on this. Hebrews 11:32 says this, and what can I say? Time is too short for me to tell you about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, gained strength and weakness, became mighty in battle, and put foreign armies to fight or to flight. Women received their dead, raised again to life. Okay? Everybody's like, I want that. So there's many prophets did great things. I remember hearing a Matt Chandler message one time where he brought this up. Everybody wants to be the one that shuts the mouths of lions, right? Everybody wants to see people raised from the dead. But listen to this next part. It says this in verse 36. Others experienced mockings and scourging as well as bonds and imprisonment. And they were stoned and they were sawn to. Who wants to be sawn to? Let's be honest here. Like, when you gave your life to Jesus, it's like, all right, what's your next step? Oh, I want to be sawn to. Like, that's my next step. Nobody says that. But that's some of the prophets what happened to them. Some of what Jesus' disciples happened. They died by sword. They wandered in the sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, afflicted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. That's the key. So even in your suffering and even in your pain, you're only just experiencing the things the prophets experienced. Take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord as an example of patience and suffering. And see this, we count as being blessed as those who have endured. Oh, I think we've heard that before again. In James chapter 1, verse 12, what does it say in James chapter 1, verse 12? It says this, Blessed is the one who endures trials, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. So if you love God, it's going to show by how you endure through struggles and through pain and suffering. And then it says this, and it gets even more specific. So we talked about a farmer, we talked about the prophets, and now we're going to talk about someone specific. See, we count as blessed those who have endured. You've heard of Job's endurance and seen the outcome the Lord brought about. The Lord is compassionate and merciful. Again, this is highlighting Exodus 34:6, that we have a compassionate God who's full of mercy, abounding in steadfast love. But Job experienced this. Y'all know the story of Job? Job lost everything. Like everything. He lost money, he lost power, he lost all his wealth, everything. Even his own wife said, "Why don't you curse God? Why are you such an idiot and you don't curse God? You obviously don't know what's going on in your life." And Job's like, "No, I'm not cursing God." Now, did Job struggle? Yeah, absolutely. Because he had to deal with these buffoons that kept on annoying him with stuff and talking about all things that he did wrong and why he was suffering. And then Job went through some questions and answers with God, but he found out that he didn't have the answers. Only God did. And then we get to the end of the book of Job, and what happens? It brings up these things. He had an outcome of where his fortunes were restored. God doubled everything that he had. He blessed him, and Job died full in old full days. I want to ask you, can you say that about your life when you come to the end of your life? That you're blessed, that God has doubled everything in your life. I'm not just talking about your money and your wealth. I'm talking about the blessings that are upon your life. But in the midst of that, you can say, it's because I suffered. It's because I endured. So we must be patient until he returns. And then finally, verse 12. And this is one of the most perplexing verses. It just seems so random. It's like you're going straight, and then it's like you take a far right, and you're going off. So just hang in here with me when I say this, and then I'm closing. Look at verse 12. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath. Let your yes mean yes, and your no mean no, so that you won't fall under judgment. Now, if you're reading this, you may think, Kyle, I've heard this before. Well, who else said this? Jesus said this. Jesus said the exact same thing in Matthew 5, 34 through 37. Now, you may be reading this and say, all right, I don't cuss, Kyle. I don't say bad words. That's not what it's talking about. Okay, Kyle, I don't take oaths, and so that means I just don't need to take oaths. No, that's not what it's saying. In fact, we can look through all the Bible that God himself, and we even talked about this morning in Genesis, that God himself instituted an oath between Abimelech and Isaac. Jesus himself even was under oath when he was being persecuted under trial. So what is James saying this when he's quoting Jesus? Well, there's two things you need to look at. Look at the word of the phrase above all. It seems very odd. Why above all? And then secondly, you won't fall under judgment. Well, the Pharisees were very religious people, and they were very proud people. And they took oaths so that they wouldn't have to hold to their commitments to God. So what they would do is they would swear to anything else that was lesser to God. Because if they swear to God, that means they would actually have to carry out their commitment. And so what they would do is they would swear to heaven, or they'd swear to some other thing that was related to God. But then whenever they could break their commitment as fast as they could do it. So, with that being said, the question I have to ask for you, above all, do you carry your commitments as a follower of Jesus Christ? Are you the first one when you're given a commitment, you're like, I'm out, bye, see you later? Because the best way you show that you have a patient faith is by enduring, having integrity. And the integrity that he's talking about is a truth that is patient. So we tell the truth, and that is evidence that we are patient with God and that we're patient with the second coming. It would be very easy in suffering to bargain with God. That's what George Stulac said. It's very easy to bargain with God. Oh God, I'll do this, but I need you to do this first. That's not how it works. Faith in God is free grace that is given to us. We don't have to bargain with God. We just have to be honest with God. The exact opposite of patience is bargaining with God to think you can get what you want. So we have the transition of being patient, and that requires us to be patient in God's timing. But instead of bargaining with God and trying to manipulate God, we be truthful. We are truthful. And so how do we know we can be truthful? How can we be honest with God? It's through prayer. And that's the very thing that verse 13 says. Is anyone among you suffering? He should pray. So here's my final thoughts. Are you truly committed to God's word? If you are, your word to others will be enough. If you need something else to add to make yourself look more godly, then you're not acting in a way of your commitments to God. Here's the thing I really want to ask many of you. Are you committed to anything in your life? Are people able to believe you when you say you will do this or you will do that? There's plenty of times I've heard people say, "Oh, well, I'm gonna be at Rush on Sunday night." Don't show up. Well, I'm gonna be here. Don't show up. Don't be, and I'm gonna get really practical. Don't be the college student. Like when you get to college, and say, "I'm gonna be there," and then you're never there. Why? Because no one can rely on you. Don't be that person. Are you that same person when it comes to your commitments with God? God, I'll do this, and then you back out on them. You might as well not even promise God that you're even going to do anything. You might as well not even swear to Him that you're going to do anything. Faith that is patient is honest, and you can be truthful. The person who has faith is truthful. Is there anything that you're adding in your faith to impress or manipulate others to think that you are godlier than you actually are? Are you putting on a show at school? Are you putting on a show in front of us? Do people think that you're actually godly here, but then in school you live like a hellion? That shows that we don't hold to our commitments. Here's my final thought. Your commitment to God will show by how you patiently endure every part of your life in Christ. Well, Kyle, how do I endure patiently? Well, the only way that you can endure patiently is because Jesus endured patiently. He endured patiently by going to the cross. He was patient upon the Father's plan. He was patient upon the cross because he knew that he was going to go to the cross and he was going to suffer, and he endured. But Jesus was greatly blessed because not only did he die, he rose from the grave. And because of that, you can suffer, you can endure, but you can have the hope of a resurrection. And so you can live in a patience, even through suffering, even through hardship, anything you're going through, whether it's chaos in your family, whether it's chaos at school, whether it's chaos in your personal life, anxiety, whatever you're dealing with. You can hold commitment to God because God will be with you. The biggest question is, are you going to be patient as a Christian? And if you're not a Christian tonight, are you going to heed his warning for the fires of hell that is before you if you don't repent and turn to Jesus? So take the warning and take the waiting. Let's go to Lord in prayer. God, I thank you again for tonight, and I pray that tonight we would take this message and, Lord,